move on to our salad now. So we're going to serve the parmigiana with a dressed green salad today. So preparing the leaves first. Now you can go to the shops and buy a nice neat packaged bag of your salad leaves already, but you pay a little bit more for having them pre-washed and packaged up. And you also use a bit of extra plastic, which is nice to try and avoid plastic where we can. So Jamie's got some great tips for washing and preparing green salad. I've got a baby cos lettuce here, and I'm going to quickly prepare this one and get it washed so that our salad leaves are all ready to go. So we've got the root part just here. I'm going to get rid of that part. And then this is my makeshift sink just here, a nice big bowl of water. So any of the parts that have been in the ground for the lettuce, this is where any of the sand's going to get trapped, is in beneath. So breaking up those leaves and popping them in. If you plunge them into a bowl of water, then the sand can drop to the bottom of the water. So rather than if you're running through a colander, sometimes it can drop from the top, go from the top leaves down to the bottom leaves. This way, the sand is heavier, so it can drop right down to the bottom, and then you can give your leaves a bit of a swish around. Break them all up. And then what we want to do is dry them off, because we're going to dress it with an oil-based dressing, and oil and water don't mix. So we want our leaves to be nice and dry so that dressing sticks really well. So once we've swished our leaves around and make sure we've got all of that sand off the leaves, bring them out. This is a great way of washing herbs as well. Again, your sandy herbs, all the sand will drop to the bottom of your bowl. Pop them into, if you've got one of these, a salad spinner is a great way to do it. If you don't have one of these, you can just use a tea towel to dry it all off as well. Okay, and then with a salad spinner, you've got this little insert in the middle just here. Pop your lid on, spin it around for a couple of minutes, and that's going to get rid of all of that sand. You can probably see in the side camera there's a lot of water coming off those leaves. Look. Whoops. Wait for it to stop spinning before you take it off.
That's a very active salad spinner you've got there.
I know, it is, isn't it? Flying lettuce leaves. And you can see there, look at all that water that's come off.
Yeah.
So it takes off a lot. And what we're left now is nice crispy leaves. So we can pop those in the fridge ready to go. So if you want to store them like this, you can store them in the fridge just wrapped in a slightly damp tea towel for several days. So you can do a bigger batch, and then you've got your greens ready to go. So we'll do that at this stage. We're not going to do our salad dressing.
Sorry, I can see, Rhonda, you've got your salad spinner, so that's, yeah.
Oh,
I can
awesome.
see, Rhonda, yeah, well done. Good job.
Perfect. Sounds good. So once you've done your leaves, let's pop them in a bowl just back in the fridge. They can get nice and cold and crispy, ready for serving. Okay, and let's move on to our dressing. All right, now I said I had the kettle boiling, week 5. Who'd like to talk us through the dressing? What's the ratio that we're using for Jamie's salad dressing ratio? Yes, Anne? Or we just unmute yourself?
I can see, I can see Jennifer's got her fingers up and she's doing her sign.
I think it's 1 vinegar, balsamic or whatever vinegar, and 3 tablespoons of oil. Is that right?
Perfect. That's it. Absolutely. So I'm going to pour the kettle, and you guys, Anne, would you like to? Thank you for that. We'll let's do the dressing together. But perfectly said. 3 parts of oil, 1 part of acid. So balsamic vinegar, if we're doing our Italian dressing. Now you should all have that page of Jamie's Down Jar dressings. So this was our Italian dressing, which was the balsamic is our acid, our 1 part acid. If you were doing the French dressing, you would just simply change that over for your red wine vinegar instead to turn it into the French dressing, and then add some Dijon mustard and the garlic. So the ratio is the same, the principles are the same, you're just mixing up the different types of acid. If you wanted to make a lemon juice dressing, you could use lemon juice. So you use 1 part of lemon to 3 parts of oil. And of course, if you want less, then just use whatever measuring receptacle you like. Use 2 teaspoons and do it that way instead. So this Italian dressing is shelf stable because it's got nothing that needs to be refrigerated. So you can keep that one in your pantry. Whereas if you're making that French dressing, once you add that fresh garlic, you do need to use it within sort of a week or 2, but keep that one in the fridge if you're doing the French dressing. Just think about whatever ingredients you're adding, does it need to be in the fridge or not? Okay, so that's obviously going to stay separate at the moment. We'll give that a shake just before we serve it so that all of the vinegar and the oil combine, and then we can dress our leaves right at the last minute. But that's job number 1 done. Put that to the side and know that we're organised for that. All right, now let's do our tomato sauce. So one of the great parts about preparing your food from scratch is knowing exactly what goes into it. And tomato sauces can be a really easy way of getting caught out when you buy those pre-prepared, say, pizza sauces and the tomato sauces with flavouring. Often they've got lots of added salt, sometimes some added sugar as well. So making a tomato sauce from scratch is a really great thing to do. Now, we've got a bit of probably a dividing ingredient coming into this sauce. So I touched on it last week, but we've got some anchovies. Who's going to be brave and do anchovies today? Yeah, good on you. Lewis, that's so firm.
Well done, Jennifer. Well done.
Oh, you're on mute, Lewis. Are you going to do anchovies? No. It's definitely a way to divide a room. With the anchovies. They are quite a strong flavour. What they do add to the tomato sauce is a very salty kind of base note to the sauce, because they just break down in the sauce and they add this nice sort of saltiness right through it. So if you're not adding the anchovies, you may want to season with a little bit of salt instead. Let's see how we go. So we'll start with the garlic. Take a clove of garlic and we're going to give that a squish. That's a technical term. A big squish. So I'm just going to pop that under the corner of my chopping board, or you can use your knife with the blade facing away. Makes it much easier to get that skin off. Okay, get rid of the skin, and then we're going to give that a chop. So using that rolling chop to get that garlic nice and small. And then if you want it smaller again, you can follow through with that cross chop over the top. Okay, so we're going to add some nice flavour into this tomato sauce. So that's ingredient number 1. We won't put our pans on just yet. We'll get everything organised and then we'll get them into the pans. You tend to try and not cook the garlic for too long before you add your other ingredients, because it does have a reasonably high sugar content and it burns quite easily. Okay. All right, garlic done. Anchovies, if you're using them, and once you've sort of, I guess, cooked this tomato sauce off, you're going to only get a very, very slight sort of salty hint. They're not going to be very strong in this, but they will have that sort of nice saltiness. So anchovies to your taste, I'm going to use 2. And give them a rough chop. They will sort of melt down in the sauce as we're cooking. They're going to go in as well. Now with your herbs, actually, let's just pause for a second. I'm going to grab those potatoes out and we'll come back to that in just a minute.
All right, has anybody got any questions so far? Can we help you at all? I think I can see everybody's keeping up, which is great.
Everyone's going well. Thanks, Maddie.
Wonderful.
Okay,
Yep.
so what I'm looking
No
for
worries.
here, I've just taken the potato and I've used a fork to rough up the sides, and I can see that they're kind of, the sides are fluffy and soft. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to drain them off now, but they're not going to be completely cooked all the way through. We're going to finish them in the oven. So I'm going to drain them first.
I always make the biggest mistake coming into these classes at lunchtime and I haven't had my lunch. So I'm starting to get very hungry and I'll be very envious of everyone's parmigianas.
That's it. Feel free to grab a snack. I think it's the worst, isn't it? When you're on the other end and everybody else has got food and not you.
Yeah, it's just not fair.
No, it's not.
I think we should assist and cook. We should cook together.
That's it. So true. So true. So I've drained the spuds and the carrot into the pot, put them back in. Now I'm going to shake them. Now take care when you're doing this. I've got my big industrial strength oven mitts. Hold the lid, because you do not want hot potatoes flying out of the pan. Okay, so what has happened now is the potatoes are probably getting all steamed up there. They've gotten all nice and rough on the outside, so they've got a bigger surface area. So once we put that oil over now, it's going to work into all of those little crevices that we've made, and it's going to get really crispy when we cook them. The other great part about doing this is when you dress vegetables when they're hot, they soak up the oil better. So you can use less oil for more effect. Make sure your veggies are nice and covered. Add a bit of salt if you like. We're going to the pub for our crispy chippies. They'd be quite heavily salted. We can lightly salt here and they're still going to taste really, really good. All right, and then into quite a hot oven. Make sure you scrape all the little bits out of the pan because they're the best part at the end. You get all these little crispy bits.
So, Jane, Rhonda has just mentioned, how about duck fat? And oh, yum.
Yes. Yes, duck fat, very delicious. And they charge you a small fortune for having those fancy duck fat potatoes in the restaurants. It is delicious. It tastes really good. Good Christmas Day thing. I guess the only thing is just to be mindful with that is that anything that comes from an animal is that saturated fat that we just need to account for in our diet. So it's everything in moderation. Absolutely delicious. Probably just not an everyday food. It's a special occasion. Special occasion food. So make sure your veggies
sometimes food.
That's right. Make sure your veggies got plenty of space in your pan. Don't overcrowd your pan. So if you want to make a bigger batch, use a couple of pans. And then I'm putting them into a 200-degree oven. And if you really need to speed it up, you can turn that up even a little higher. And in about 25 minutes or so, I'm going to set another timer. Check how that's going. Okay, so back to the sauce. So we've got garlic chopped up and the anchovies. Now, another dividing ingredient, chili. If you would like to use it, there's a few ways you can go with your chili. You can leave it out if you're not a chili fan. If you've got the big long red chilies, we've used them previously in the course, you can split them in half, strip your seeds out and chop them up. Or Jamie's suggestion for this recipe is just to take, this is a little fiery bird's eye chili. I'm going to pop the whole thing into the sauce. I'm just going to pierce a couple of holes in there, and that's just going to add a hint of chili flavour in. So it's going to start to absorb some of that chili flavour, and then once the sauce is cooked off, I'll pull it out again. So that can go straight into the pan. Let's put this all into our pans now, and we'll start our pans off on a low heat just to start bringing out the flavour with that garlic and the anchovies and the chili. You can add a touch of olive oil. It needs very little, probably only a half a teaspoon. And let's just start off on a slow or a low heat. So that'll be about 60 seconds or so, just to bring out the flavour and that garlic. While that's going on, let's move on to our herbs. So how did everyone go getting herbs? I know the recipe calls for basil, but it is a little bit, depending on where you are, it is basil's a summer herb. So if you didn't get basil, you can definitely substitute for, I've got some parsley here, fresh oregano. Depending on how much fresh herbs you've got, if you would like to, you can use the stems as well for extra flavour. So if you want to do that, just pick your leaves off. They can go in later because they're quite soft and delicate and don't need much cooking. With the stems, you can add them a little earlier. So fold your stems up and then we can use that rolling top to slice through. And then you're really making the most out of the herbs that you're using. Okay, so those parsley leaves will go in later. I'll give them a rough chop now, but I'm not going to add them just yet. So our garlic and our anchovies has had about 60 seconds or so to cook. So let's add our tomatoes now. So we're adding 1 full tin of tomatoes into the pan. And now we're just going to let that sauce simmer off until it's quite well reduced. So by reduced, we mean evaporate, the liquid is evaporating out and it's really starting to thicken. Because we want, at the end of the day, we want a nice crispy parmigiana. And if we leave our sauce really liquidy, it's going to make our parmigiana soggy. So we want a lot of that liquid to evaporate off and we want the flavours to start sort of coming together as well. So let's give it the occasional stir. You can put it on a low to medium heat. Just make sure you don't forget about it. You want to keep it moving around the pan every few minutes.
Lovely. So Jane, for those who may not have used anchovies,
Yes.
Should they add a touch of seasoning to their sauce?
So yeah, for those that haven't put the anchovies in, maybe just wait at the end. It's really to taste, I guess. The anchovies are bringing salt into our sauce. The other way that salt will end up in our dish is the cheese. So cheese has got quite a high amount of salt in it as well. So we all have different kind of taste buds with the amount of salt that we like to eat. You can taste your sauce. If you feel like it needs salt, then add a pinch. If you're someone that doesn't have much salt in your diet, it does become a little bit of a personal thing. So yeah, tasting your food regularly and seasoning to your taste is a good way to go. All right, so let's let those cook off for a little while. And we're going to move on to our crumbing now. So we're going to make our schnitzels. So what you will need now is some flour, egg, and breadcrumbs. So we're going to set up a crumbing station. So I've got my egg here. Think casting our minds all the way back to week 1. We're going to check the freshness of the egg first. So breaking it into a ramekin and having a smell to make sure that there's no rotten egg smells. Then you can give your egg a light beat. Just a light whip up. I'm going to transfer that into a bigger bowl just to make it easier to dunk my schnitzel in. Transfer that to a lower heat. My tomato sauce is cooking a little bit too vigorously while I'm not free to stir it. Is that right? Okay. Next up, so pop your flour on the plate. Just bearing in mind, anything that we put on these plates, we won't be able to use again because once it's come into contact with the raw chicken, it needs to go in the bin. So if in doubt about how much you're going to use, you can always add more. So add a bit of flour, enough to coat however many chicken breasts you're doing. So just a light covering of flour. And then on the third plate, you need your breadcrumbs. This is a perfect way to use up all your crusts if you're not a crust eater at home. So I'm going to whiz up some breadcrumbs now. Got a couple of slices of bread just here, or keep your crusts in the freezer. Now, small positive changes is one of the things that we can do when we're cooking from scratch. So rather than using the white breadcrumbs, I've got whole grain here. So it's higher in fibre, more fibre, really good for our tummy. So that's a small change that we can make in our diets if we're not already, just to make it a nice, well-rounded meal. So a few seconds in a food processor and you have your breadcrumbs ready to go. This is a great way to do your breadcrumbs. If you buy the breadcrumbs in the box already, they do need to put quite a few preservatives in them to keep them fresh that way. Even if you make too many breadcrumbs like this, you can then always portion some up and put them in the freezer. Just bear in mind as well though that you can't, once you've used these, you can't reuse them if they've had that chicken in there. So maybe keep some to the side, you can always add more if you need to. Let's give our sauces another stir and then we'll come back to the next step. Okay, we'll grab our chicken out now and we're going to make our schnitzels.
All right, I'm just checking in to make sure that looks like you're all keeping up, which is fantastic, and you've all got your head down and nice and busy.
So, schnitzel production line about to happen.
Yeah, looks great.
Yep. Excellent. All right, so
you've done well, Jane. They're great graduates.
Yes, yeah. So everyone's been fabulous in this group. You've all been very, very easy to work with. I think most of you all know your way around the kitchen very well. Now, to make our chicken schnitzels nice and flat.
Marie.
Thing to turn it off. I know what it's doing.
To make our chicken schnitzels nice and flat, we can use a piece of baking paper, fold it in half. Then pop your piece of chicken in the middle. It's time for some more kitchen therapy. So fold it over. Now, we're aiming to get our chicken in a nice even width so that it cooks at an even rate, because with chicken, it's only safe if it's cooked all the way through. So we don't want a thick part here and a thin part here so that it's cooking unevenly. We're going to use our rolling pin if you've got one. If you don't have a rolling pin, a heavy based saucepan or fry pan can be good. And let's use that to mash out our chicken. When you've been out and you've seen that they have those schnitzels the size of a plate, you can imagine if you get a chicken breast, butterfly it out, chop it in half and do that. That's exactly how you make a huge chicken schnitzel, is to make it quite thin and quite flat. So bring it out to reasonably thin. But we also don't want the chicken too thick in this, because we want our chicken to cook through and our breadcrumbs to be nice and crispy on the outside. So we've got nice flat pieces of chicken, and now we're going to start crumbing. Before I do that, let's give our sauces another stir, and I'm going to move my potatoes around in the pan. Ooh. Never good wearing glasses when you open the oven door. I'm all fogged up. Okay, so just moving those potatoes around so they cook evenly. Okay, now onto our schnitzels. So the process here is flour first. We're lightly dusting in flour. So use tongs if you have some, so that you don't have to Wash your hands because, of course, as I've mentioned earlier, chicken, when we talked about from week 1, the risk with chicken when you're working in that is the salmonella bacteria. So you do need to be mindful of food safety when you're working with chicken, particularly not letting that raw chicken come into contact with anything else in the kitchen, not on your chopping board, not on your hands. So get rid of anything that it's come into contact with needs to go over to your sink for wash up with hot soapy water. So once you've dusted it in the flour, give it a gentle shake to get rid of any big amounts, and then it's going to go into your egg. So this is crumbing for anything at all that you like to crumb. So this will work if you like your crumbed fish. This is a beautiful way to crumb your fish. For those that are vegetarian, you could do a crumbed eggplant, crumbed veal. So you pop it into the egg now, coat it all the way over, and then just hold it above and let that egg drain off. So this is going to be what's going to make those breadcrumbs stick. So, and then onto your breadcrumbs. Flip it over. Give it a gentle press so that those breadcrumbs stick into the egg. And then get yourself a clean plate, and you can store these in the fridge until you're ready to use them. If you've purchased fresh chicken and extra than what you need, you can do these and then freeze them, and then you've got your schnitzels ready to go for another day. So that's schnitzel number 1 done. So do as many as you like, and then you've got quick and easy crumbed chicken ready to go. And if you're cooking for the littlies, you can make them into smaller pieces, and you've got really delicious, nutritious homemade chicken nuggets ready for them as well. So if you wanted to make just a schnitzel, you can even, rather than doing the parmigiana, you might decide to add some fresh herbs to this, something like some thyme. Put it into your flour or your breadcrumbs, and then you've got a lovely sort of herb schnitzel as well.
Looks like we've got some busy crumbing stations there,
Yeah,
Jane.
absolutely.
Everybody's concentrating so well.
Yeah. It's a concentrating kind of task, and it's a messy kind of task as well.
I used to line up my children when they were little across the bench and get them to crumb the chicken for me, and they'd have a bowl each, and one would do their flour and someone would do their breadcrumbs, and we'd have chicken crumbed in no time.
That's so good. Such a good way to get kids into the kitchen, isn't it, Maddie?
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
Great activity.
Yeah. And they get, if kids just love crumbed stuff, so it's such a good way to get them into cooking and enjoying something they've made. Right. So once you've done as many schnitzels as you're going to do, let's have a clean up, because as I said, we want to be careful that we're not doing any cross contact. So we'll get rid of anything that we've used for our crumbing. Any extra flour can go in the bin, egg down the sink, breadcrumbs in the bin as well, or to the chooks or compost or wherever it is that you send your scraps. We'll put our schnitzels back in the fridge for a minute, and we'll bring them out shortly, ready to cook. Oops. Load that up with a bit more breadcrumbs. Now, do keep an eye on your sauces as well. So we want them to be fairly thick. Once they're starting to look quite pasty, you can turn your pan off and just let that sit. We'll be using it fairly shortly. Okay. Okey-doke. Mm. Now I'm going to give my bench a quick wipe down just in case there's any egg that's dribbled on the bench. Because of course we don't have just the chicken to watch out for today. We've got chicken and egg that we're working with, so we need to be extra careful with our food safety. Okay, looking better. Now, if you're not planning to have your schnitzel for lunch, you may just choose to do the rest of these steps later when you're about to serve it, because it is nice to have a nice crispy schnitzel. There's a couple of ways that you can go about cooking it. You can do it in a fry pan in an oven, or you can do it all the way in a fry pan. So first up, take your fry pan and preheat it. We're going to pan fry the schnitzels first to get them nice and crispy on the outside. So get your pan hot first, and then we'll add our olive oil in a minute. If you're doing it 100% in the pan, just be mindful when you're cooking this, when you're choosing your pan heat, that we do want our chicken in the middle to be cooked all the way through. So we're looking for it to change from pink to a white colour. So if you go too high on your heat and you get your outside too crispy, you're going to have a burnt outside without your chicken being cooked in the middle. So start on a low to medium heat. You can turn it up if you want to, but we do want to make sure we allow enough time for it to all be done at the same time. So once your pan is nice and hot, let's add a little bit of oil, say a couple of teaspoons. You can tell that your oil is hot and ready to go when it rolls around the pan evenly. When you first put it in, it'll hold together and it won't coat the bottom of the pan. So give it a few seconds, and if your pan's nice and hot, then your oil will loosen up and you'll be able to roll it around the pan quite easily. And when that's good to go, you can pop your schnitzel in. Now, if your sauce is still not quite ready, don't rush this part. You do want to be patient and make sure that that sauce is nice and pasty. Okay, so from here, if we're doing it in the oven or under the grill, get yourself an oven tray ready to go. I always use baking paper because it saves on the washing up. Once it's been fried on both sides, we're going to assemble our parmigiana on this tray and finish it in the oven or under the grill. If you don't have an oven or a grill, once you've turned your schnitzel over on that first side, then what we can do is put our sauce on top and then our cheese on top, put a lid on, and you're creating like a little oven inside your fry pan. You can do it that way as well, because then that bottom part's going to cook and the top part's going to get nice and warm with the lid on. Or even a piece of aluminium foil just over the top of your fry pan. So that's another way around, not the way around it. Not everybody that we work with has ovens, so we've always got solutions for different ways of doing it. And if you're doing it in the oven, you'll want your oven on a medium heat, about 180, or you can cook it in the pan for a little bit longer, put your grill on and just finish it off, melt that cheese underneath grill. Speaking of cheese, getting my cheese ready. So I've got some cherry bocconcini. Bocconcini is one of the freshest types of cheese that you can get. It's got quite a neutral flavour and it melts beautifully. But you can use whatever your favourite cheese is for this. If you're a blue cheese fan, you can make a blue cheese parmigiana or cheddar cheese if that's what you like. Okay, so keep an eye on your schnitzel. When it gets nice and golden brown on one side, then you can turn it over. You may need to add a touch more oil on the other side. You need to keep an eye on it. Let's have a look and see how we're travelling. Okay, I'm going to add just a tiny bit more oil just so that it gets nice and crispy on the other side.
So Jane, sometimes when your breadcrumbs are fresh, they do soak up a little bit more of the oil because they're nice and fresh.
Yes.
And that's what's happening with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, scale bread is a good solution for crumbs. Now I will show you just on that side camera. You can see there that can you see that? That schnitzel's nice and golden brown. So if you're doing just a schnitzel rather than a parmigiana, you're almost there. So I'll let this go nice and crispy for a couple more minutes and then I'm going to assemble my parmigiana on the plate.
So Jane, as a rule of thumb for to making sure that the chicken's well cooked through that beautiful brown crispy schnitzel, how many minutes each side, depended upon how thick that chicken is?
Yeah. So I would say, I guess probably the safest way to go is to actually cut into the chicken and look at the colour. Just rather than, because I can't see how thick everybody's bashed theirs out. So particularly with the chicken breast, it's quite easy to spot because you've got that change in colour from pink to white. If you're using a chicken thigh, sometimes there can be a little bit of brownness on the thigh. It's that different cut of meat, but you're looking for brown or white rather than that pink colour. It changes in texture as well. So you can check this, you have a bit of a stringy sort of texture. But just cut into, if you've got a slight variation in thickness, cut into your thicker part. Right, that's my potatoes. Yeah, they're going. Okie dokie. So, that schnitzel's nice and golden brown on both sides now. Now I'm going to assemble the parmigiana on the plate.
I'm sure everyone's kitchens are smelling beautiful with that delicious crumminess.
Yes, looks pretty good. Now my sauce is not quite there. It still needs a little bit more cooking. So I'm going to use this tomato sauce that I've got here already. As I love to say in the cooking shows, here's one I prepared earlier. I could be patient and wait a couple of minutes, but I'm not going to be. So nice and pasty. Can you see that consistency there? It's a lot of that liquid's evaporated out, so it's not going to make the schnitzel soggy. So I'm going to spread that out over the top. If you love your herbs, this is a great time to add some extra herbs as well. So, which I do. So I'm going to take some of that thyme and I'm going to sprinkle that, just the fresh leaves over the top. Stripping those off the stem. And some of those parsley leaves that we put to the side as well. And then the cheese on top. So because these parsley leaves, or the basil, if you're using basil, are a lot more delicate, they require a lot less cooking, so you can add them at a later stage. And then your cheese on top. So these cherry bocconcinis I'm going to dot across the top. If you have had a divided household and you're keen to try the anchovies but no one else is, you can slice them up and add them at this point as well. You could layer them over the top to give it a try that way. Okay, so schnitzel done. Now I'm going to pop that into the oven. So around about 180 degrees. Pop it in for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll test to make sure that that chicken's cooked in the middle and the cheese is nice and melty in the top. Oh, and the glasses are fogged up again. How's everyone travelling? Has anyone got any questions or anything to say at this point?
I think everybody's really busy getting their schnitzels organised from what I can see.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Well, mine's going to be 5 minutes or so. So let's just let everybody work through what they've got going on if we're all busy, and then in 5 minutes or so we'll start plating it up. And this is a good time if anyone is keen for a chat. Feel free to unmute and let us know how you're going. So if you do find that this tomato sauce you've made too much, freezes beautifully. So you could even freeze this. If you want to freeze up your schnitzels, freeze up your tomato sauce all ready to go in little portions, then you can just take it all out and you've got a very quick and easy dinner. Ready, just doing the assembling part and then that final little flash in the oven. I'm going to start getting ready to do all of my plating now. So one of the things that we're always trying to achieve with our classes is a nice balanced plate. So we've got our green leaves here today, and they've crisped up beautifully in the oven. So they've gone nice and cold and crunchy. So I'm going to cover about half my plate with those green leaves. And because I'm just doing up one serve, I'm going to just dress straight onto the plate. I won't use all of that dressing. Now, unlike the commercial dressings that use an emulsifier to keep it all combined, when we make our dressings at home, it does separate out into the parts. So you'll always need to give it that shake before you serve it. And then you can just simply use a spoon to dress over the top. So over with the dressing. So of course you want to do this just a couple of minutes before serving so that your lettuce doesn't go soggy, unless you like soggy lettuce. All right, now veggie time. Fingers crossed my potatoes have had enough time to go beautiful and crispy. Let's have a look. Okie doke. Let me show you what they're looking like. So these veggies here, if you've left them long enough, can you see just there? They go lovely and crispy golden brown, really, really crunchy. Can you see on that shot there? So it's worth just taking extra few minutes. If they haven't cooked evenly in the pan, then take out the crunchy ones and put the other ones back in the oven. These are good. You can actually half prepare these vegetables as well. Like if you've got a Christmas day, these are great Christmas day veggies. Do that pre-cooking, that parboiling beforehand, and then just have them sitting in the fridge. And then you can do this last part, and it's a great way to do your roasted veggies. And be a little bit organised as well. Okay, I'm going to put the rest of them back into the oven because they do need a few more minutes. And it's worth taking that extra 5 minutes to make sure that they're extra crispy. Okay. And then finally, time to check that chicken. Now, this is the most important part of the class. Make sure your chicken's cooked. Let's have a look. I've got the cheese nice and melted there, but I'm going to slice through the middle, and I'm looking for white all the way through. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so once your chicken has changed colour right the way through, there's no pink in there, then you're good to serve. Okay, the nice part about baking paper is it just slides straight off onto your plate. So here we go, we've got a beautiful balanced plate now. Another great thing about this, as Australians, we tend to eat a little bit more protein than we need and not enough fruit and vegetables. So we've taken our little chicken, and a serve of protein is generally about, you know, the size of your hand, so it's not overly big, but sometimes we're so accustomed to having a massive big steak. So by taking your rolling pin or your fry pan and bashing out that chicken, we're still feeling like we get a nice healthy serve of protein. We're stretching it out a little bit further. So we've got that right amount of protein for our balanced plate, and then we've still covered half of the plate with our salad and our vegetables as well. So we've got a beautifully balanced plate there. So that's mine done. Have I frozen? No. Oh, I just it just paused for a second there. I thought, oh.
No, we've still got you. I think you're frozen because we're all sitting here looking at your beautiful plate of food.
Everyone's got food envy. It looks beautiful, doesn't it? It's a really colourful dish. It looks great on the plate. It's got the colours of the Italian flag on the parmigiana. Red, white and green.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think my second camera's frozen. I think that's where it's yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Yeah. So while you're all finishing off, I just want to point out a survey that will be coming through to you in the last email. So you would have got a survey on week 1 of the course, and there'll be another survey coming out after week 5. One of the reasons that we try and capture information is that in the face-to-face environment, the program has been followed by universities, and it's been shown to get people eating more vegetables and fruit over the course of their week. But this online forum is a new way of delivery for us. So it's really great to be able to capture information about how it's working or if it's working. So if you do have a few moments to fill out that survey, it would be really helpful for us to get your feedback. Any comments we would love to hear about the course, good, bad or indifferent, anything that you found helpful or not so helpful or would like to see done differently. But yeah, it'd be great to hear from you.